In this training, we'll be looking at how to organize and understand your Google Drive. What we aim to cover is for you to have a better understanding of your storage options and where your files live, understanding more about your My Drive, things that are shared with me, and your shared drives. There are three main storage options that are being provided by the school. There is iCloud, which is associated with Apple, Google Drive, which is associated with Google, and the OneDrive, which is associated with Microsoft. We are aiming to continue using iCloud from Apple, which allows your laptop and your iPad to be able to back up and save your files, as well as the Google Drive as the main place for middle and high school to work out of, whether it's for the admin side of work that you do or for the purposes of teaching and learning with your students. What we are aiming to do is moving away from storing files in the OneDrive, and this is obviously owing to the fact that there are too many storage options. So we'll talk about how that process is going to work later on. If you're not familiar with iCloud, iCloud comes from Apple and is Apple's cloud-based storage system. When you get your managed Apple ID from myself or from another member of the Digital Teaching and Learning Department, you will have access to a school iCloud account that has 200 gigabytes of storage. We mainly will use this in middle and high school to ensure that files that you save on your desktop and your documents within your laptop are saved and stored in a cloud-based system. So if anything ever happens to your laptop, this information and these files can be recovered. The same applies to your iPad. You will need to get your managed Apple ID set for the iCloud account in your iPad, so that if anything ever happens to your iPad, your files are stored safely. In the past, IT has recommended that staff have a personal Apple ID on their devices. We have since adopted managed Apple IDs, a decision that has had to go through the change board, and we are now starting to move away from personal Apple IDs on school devices, and instead having the managed Apple IDs that the school will make and provide to you. If you want more information about this, you can look at the support page from Apple, the link is provided here, or you can visit the MAP website under Managed Apple IDs. Google Drive is probably the most commonly used tool across the school in the teaching departments. It is a free cloud-based storage system that enables you to store and access your files online, as well as working with Google's tools for productivity. This is the one that we are going to try and promote the use of as much as possible across middle and high school, and moving away from the OneDrive, owing to the fact that our students cannot always have access to Microsoft or the Apple tools on their devices if they are in the high school with BYOD in place. Whereas Google is web-based and anyone should be able to access it no matter what type of device they are using. OneDrive, I'll just touch on briefly. It is Microsoft's version of a cloud-based storage system. But during the lockdown, we had a lot of teachers not knowing where their files were and were asking for help a lot of the time. This is owing to the school still having Office 365 accounts, which we do not have any control over mandating to do away with. Microsoft is what the staff up in head office and Hayward House and the business side of the school will make use of, so the accounts will still exist for now. However, for more continuity and for us to be able to support you in what you do day to day, we are encouraging people to move their files out of OneDrive and to work exclusively in Google Drive. So why is this important? Aside from the things that I have just listed, we are also looking at how we evaluate ourselves against the framework of the ISTE standards. The ISTE standards are the International Standards for Technology and Education, and they are internationally recognized. We currently use these standards to evaluate our students in early childhood and lower school, and are moving these also into the middle school. What we don't do yet is use the ISTE standards for educators to evaluate ourselves against how our peers around the world are using technology in education. While we are not officially doing this in any capacity, it is good to know how we as educators are measuring up against other educators around the world when it comes to 21st century digital skills and best practices for technology in education. When it comes to the ISTE standards for educators, we have pulled a few of these that we feel best represent how we would utilize the Google Drive in our classrooms. The first one is being a digital citizen. We as educators need to model and promote the management of personal data and our digital identity, and this is something that we expect our students to learn how to do, but it's also something that we should be modeling ourselves. We should know where our files are, and we should know who has access to those files. These are all things that you can control within the Google Drive. Being a collaborator. Google Drive is a perfect tool for being able to collaborate either with students or with other staff members on digital resources. Being a designer. Making use of the technology and the tools within the Google Drive means that we're able to personalize learning experiences for our students. So rather than take a test, print it out, and handwrite on top of it to make changes, you can easily design your own tests utilizing tools like Google Docs. And being an analyst, provide alternative ways for students to demonstrate competency and reflect on their learning. By being able to work collaboratively on documents or slides presentations within Google Drive means that students can see our comments or our feedback directly on their documents without the need to email or print out or have a file move around a lot. So this is just framework to help you see how other educators in your position would be approaching and evaluating their own best practices. Now for students, when it comes to Google Drive, we have pulled these 4 standards that we feel best align with their use of Google Drive. So being an empowered learner, they use technology to seek feedback that informs and improves their practice to demonstrate learning in a variety of ways. So if a student feels empowered enough to design a Google form and send it to all their teachers to get feedback on how they are progressing, that would be an example of an empowered learner. Being a digital citizen, so much like we would promote that mindset within our educators, we would want to see that with our students as well. So for them working in Google Drive, they know where their files are, they know who has access to them, and they know what level of access someone has to their files. Being a creative communicator, students are able to choose appropriate platforms and tools. This is really starting to take off now with students who are using iPads, and that is something we definitely want to see continue on. But they can also make use of the different platforms such as Google Drive and the Google tools within. And much like being a global collaborator for teachers, we want students to be able to do that as well. So let's take a look now at MyDrive. These are some of the topics we're going to be talking about in this session, but it's really to help you have a better understanding of MyDrive. You may actively be using your MyDrive on an everyday basis, but there might be some things that you didn't know about it. And by going back to the basics, we're giving everyone access to the same framework to build upon. Your Google files. These include docs, sheets, slides, sites, drawings, and forms. These are the 6 main fundamental tools that you have access to. Now, what you can do with those files are store them in Google Drive, organize them, name them, edit them, make copies of them, share them, and delete them. And that is explicitly to the Google files that you can do all of these types of things right in the Google Drive. When it comes to your Apple files, so files that are made with tools like Pages, Numbers, Keynote, iMovie Clips, and GarageBand, you can store these files in your Google Drive. You can also organize them, put them into folders, but you don't have the ability to preview all the file types or make edits or changes to these files. So for example, if I'm working on an iMovie project for a member of staff and I need to send that project file to them so they can carry on working on it on their computer, iMovie files are too big to email. So what I can do is pop the iMovie file directly into Google Drive, share the link to the member of staff who needs it, and they can download it on their end. It is mainly just for storing and sharing files within the drive that you have made using the Apple products, and you cannot collaborate on these files inside the drive. Some other files that are listed include your Microsoft files, PDFs, images, and also video and audio files. So it used to be that when you were bringing Microsoft files into Google Drive, that you had to convert the file from a Microsoft to a Google tool product. That is not necessarily the case anymore. You should be able to bring your Word, your Excel, and your PowerPoint projects directly into Google Drive and carry on working on them. So what we want to try and do is have more staff who have years and years worth of tools that they still use, files that they still use. We want to see those files move out of the OneDrive and move into the Google Drive so that everything is stored in one place and organized easily. So some tips for organizing My Drive. It's important to get in the habit of naming, whether it's files or folders, and specifically coming up with naming conventions. So if you're going to have a series of documents that align with a particular unit or a particular project, it's good to get in the habit of naming those all in a similar fashion so that when you are searching for them and you type in, for example, similes, any item you put into your Google Drive that has similes in the description or in the name is going to appear. So it's just a good habit to get into in order to know where your files are and how you've named them. What we don't want to see is lots of untitled docs. And if it's something that we expect our students to do when they're submitting files to us for assignments or for assessments, we should be doing that as well. Organizing your files into folders and subfolders. As you can see in the example here, we've got lots of folders, but inside those folders are more folders. So for example, under 2018 to 2019, that is an overall folder, but inside there might be more folders relating to what classes are being taught that year, and then inside those classes, what projects are going to be going on or what units are going on, and then inside those specific student folders. Using file and folder descriptions. This is probably less known and probably less used, but when you click on a file or a folder, you can tap on the little I, the information just up here. And at the bottom, you can see the activity. That's all about the changes that may have occurred on that file or in that folder, as well as the specific details, such as who the owner is, when it was modified, when it was opened, and when it was created. But you can also type in a description here. And when you do a Google search, if you're looking for something, you can type it in and it will find anything relating to the description as well. So it's just a way of providing either more information for yourself, or if you've got a big folder of lots of files and data and you're sharing that with someone else, you can put a description in there so it provides more information. Create a master folder for each school year. So you can kind of approach this in two different ways. Ben has told me that he does this every year and works out of that academic folder every year, each year. But what I would do is make one of these folders for the end of the year. And everything that I had been working on as part of that academic year would then be organized maybe around May or June directly into that academic folder. Color coding your folders. This was a surprise to one member of staff. They didn't know how to do this, and that was really fun to get to see their face light up with excitement. But you can color code your folders. Simply do a right mouse click on the folder, and you'll have a drop-down menu of options, and one of those will be change color. You can also do a numbering system. Now, when you are naming files or folders, Google Drive will either alphabetize them or put them in number order. Numbers tend to come before the letters of the alphabet, and special characters such as underscores will come before the numbers. So being able to organize in this way might help if you need a specific file or a specific folder always near the top of your drive. You can assign it a number and numbers will jump right to the top. So we talk a bit about sharing within My Drive. You can share files and you can share folders, but it's important to understand the difference between who has access versus who has the ability to collaborate. So access might be that I'm just sending this file or this folder to you, but you can only view it, or I can ask you to make your own copy. Additionally, I can also invite someone into that document to collaborate, and I can give them specific access either to comment or to edit on that document. Different users can have different levels of access, and you can determine that when you go to share in this way. Additionally, you can also share to larger groups of users through the Get Link option, and then you can then determine what access they're going to have through the settings. Shared with me. We're just touching on this briefly to let you know that shared with me are files that are shared directly to you, but they are not always saved to your My Drive. And the best way to view those files is to go to the Shared with Me section of your Google Drive. And you can see, usually in chronological order, the most recent at the top, files that have been shared with you. And when you see them sitting in your My Drive, what it really is more of a shortcut to the file. The file that's shared with you doesn't live in your Google Drive, it lives in someone else's. And lastly, shared drive. It's important to understand about shared drive and how they function. So in a shared drive, everyone has access to anything that's being put in there. And that's when they are added as a participant of the shared drive. There are no owners once a shared drive is made. Anyone that's added in automatically becomes a member, and they are not linked to an individual Google account. So if the original creator of the shared drive happens to leave the school, the members can remain, and all of the information in there remains as well. So when you might use a shared drive could be for grade level teams, department teams, divisional sections of the school, if something is being worked on that's project specific, or for clubs and activities. And there's a handy little graphic there that talks about files owned by you versus files owned by the team or a group, all about sharing and access within My Drive versus Shared Drive. So Shared Drive is really handy if you have a new member of staff joining either a specific grade level or a specific department, and they need access to lots and lots of different files, but you don't want to share all those individually. If they live in if they live in the shared drive, you can simply just provide access to that shared drive, and they immediately get access to everything that is stored in there. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to myself, Lindsay Stuttard, or to Ben B. Harry, and we'll be happy to field those for you.